Good morning, everyone, and welcome to.
Thank you so much, Karine. How you doing?
To be here again with you. One, um, let's see. Today we have some special guests. I am here today with my co-host John Lago, the chair of our Global Trade Committee. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Karine.
All right. And we also have a special guest for today, Akindele
Good morning.
Akinyemi, who is a distinguished leader with more than 2 decades of experience spanning educational advocacy, global public policy, and community-driven economic development. As managing principal of GABA Marketplace Center, he leads transformative initiatives that bridge global trade and policy with local impact, particularly advancing inclusive growth across Michigan. As a trusted academic advisor and sought after motivational speaker, Akinyemi is deeply committed to expanding educational access and outcomes. He empowers students through personalized guidance and strategic insight, helping them chart pathways to meaningful, impactful careers. His community leadership includes helping deliver 1.8 million public library project in Inkster, Michigan, securing a 1 million enhancement grant for a state trade hub, and advancing a 1.7 charter school initiative focused on academic excellence. He also facilitates a dynamic business ecosystem, closing seven figures transactions, and mobilizing over 1 million in business finance to catalyze entrepreneurship and sustainable development. Akinyemi holds a Bachelor's of Science in African American Studies, a Master's of Art in Educational Leadership, and a Network and Cybersecurity certification. I am the most proud to call him a friend and a brother in arms. Welcome to the MAC Global B2B Agora, Akindele.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure having you be with us today virtually, right? But I remember you were with us in person at Pitch Black the year this all started.
Yes.
What, 6 years almost ago? No,
Oh my
5 years
God.
ago?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about right. Yep.
My goodness, time does fly.
Hello. Yep.
Yes.
Hey.
John,
Yes.
how are
So
things?
Akindele, I'm
Yes.
good. So Akindele, we are so glad to have you here today, and
Thank you.
you you're the right person to have this conversation
Okay.
with. And today we are going to focus on you know how about strengthening the foundation before execution, trade missions. So we will explore how to design trade missions that move from introduction to implementation. So that brings me to our first question. Um, from your experience, what are the most common challenges U.S. businesses face when they're attempting to enter West African market? I mean by that, are the primary gap related to institutional coordination, regulatory navigation, capital management, structuring, supply chain logistics, cultural alignment, or how can properly design trade mission address these gaps before arrival? Sorry for the question is a little bit long, but yeah.
No, I'm used to it. This is one of the trainings you do when you're in education is answer long questions. Again, thank you for having me this morning. Um, just again, um, I think it's a very important question that you're asking, especially in this day and age where things are shifting geopolitically and geoeconomically, and Africa is right at the center of the global South, and so that's a very important question. Just to answer it, from my experience, the most common challenges U.S. businesses face are not about demand, because West Africa already have demand, but about execution discipline, and primarily it fall into a few categories, such as institutional coordination. So what that means is businesses often enter without aligned government chamber or credible counterpart support. Another one normally is regulatory navigation, such as custom procedures and compliance pathways that require local clarity early on, capital structuring, firms that underestimate the need for trade finance, working capital, and so forth, supply chain logistics. This is something that when I'm into port routing, warehousing, last minute delivery, inspection systems, and cultural alignment. That's a big one because relationships and trust building matters as much as contracts. And I think one of the key things that we make the mistake about is we think we can go to Africa and get a quick contract. It doesn't work like that. It's business. Business is based on relationships and systems. And so properly designed trade missions address these gaps before arrival by ensuring participants that enter the market with vetted counterparts, clear compliance sequences, financing pathways, and defined transactions, and so forth.
All right. So I think one thing that's important that I would like to ask you, can you talk to us a little bit more about your organization, the GABA Marketplace Center?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. The GABA Marketplace Center uh, the GABA Marketplace Center is a holding company. We focus on B2B, wholesale, retail, and e-commerce. We started actually officially about 2 years ago, but the mission didn't start 2 years ago. It's part of the Global African Business Association ecosystem that started 12 years ago. One of the key things that we learned 12 years ago when we started, myself and my co-founder and current CEO, Ms. Rary, we both talked about how to support African grocery stores. What was happening was that the African grocery stores in the area where we here in Michigan wasn't getting enough support, and so we started GABA, trying to build up technical assistance and so business assistance and so forth. But the marketplace component of it started around 2 years ago with our first flagship store in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the African Caribbean food market, and where we launched the GABA Marketplace Center. One of the key things of this entire company is building a warehouse. Actually, the warehouse, we purchased the warehouse last year. It's actually being retrofitted as you and I are talking this morning. I just literally before we logged in spoke to the contractor. We're about 80% done with renovating the warehouse. It should be up and running by May for service. We did this because what was happening was a lot of the grocery store owners were driving to Chicago. They drive to Chicago or Cincinnati 4 or 5 hours one way, another 4 or 5 hours back. We said that doesn't make any sense. We spoke to our state partners, both in economic development and on the policy side. They said none of that makes sense. We were able to secure funding and to move this entire process forward. But it's bigger than just a warehouse, and it's bigger than just supporting retail markets, and it's bigger than the e-commerce. It's also a signal to let folks know that when we're having conversations on trade and investment, especially here in the Midwest, you're in Nebraska, I'm here in Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. sometimes we get left out of the conversation because a lot of conversations on Africa centers around Washington, D.C. And we forget that there are Africans that live outside Washington, D.C. that have a voice. And so we're not looking at it from a federal level. There are some things we look at a federal level, such as critical minerals and rare earth elements, which is a conversation we can have later. But there are other things that we could talk about within our respective spaces. Why should DC have all the fun when it comes to talking about Africa? What about Nebraska? There are Togolese, there are Nigerian, there are South Sudanese nationals in Nebraska. How come they're not at the center of the conversation? Same thing here in the state of Michigan. And so this GABA Marketplace Center is not just a company, it's a movement, and it's also a trade facilitation that we want to connect the dots with the Midwest as well as the Great Lakes, and even Canada should play a role in this.
Yeah.
You know, what you have started in Michigan and what you got going on in terms of engagement locally is truly amazing. I admire your drive and the efforts that you are doing to create local engagement and recognition for the communities that you serve in Michigan. Through GABA, you've told us a little bit about the structure that you have in place there. Like you say, decentralization is a key part of this process, right? We shouldn't just look at Washington for all of it. I'm from Togo. John is from Burkina Faso. In Nebraska here, we have a large community, a large African community, as you know, from having visited before. What has worked in Michigan for your communities there to bring about that spotlight, or to, like you said, to increase that engagement? And what advice do you have for our communities here to jumpstart that engagement or to really drive it up?
Well, for 12 years, it's just like any other organization. We experimented. We launched. One of the key things that we did, I was actually living in Houston teaching middle school, and I reconnected with our CEO, who I've known since high school. And we came up with this thing called GABA. At the time, it was called the National African Business Association. And one of the things we wanted to do was we didn't want to be a traditional chamber. We wanted to root our organization within a municipality and use the municipality as a municipal incubator to attract African-based businesses into the city for economic development. And that's what we did. And so we decided to get appointed to local boards and commissions. We were on our city's DDA, Downtown Development Authority, Economic Development Corporation. I ran for library board, won that. And as you mentioned in the biography, led an effort of $1.8 million capital investment to build a new library. I'm still on the library board as the president of the board of trustees, moving that library into the 21st century. But we learned a lot about, it was mostly trial and error. And what we learned in that experience is that cities have a voice. If you have a relationship with your mayors, your city council people, and your economic development within a local municipality as an organization, you pretty much will win if you are working towards a goal. And that's what we've been doing for the last 12 years. We focused on business, government, and technology as our platform. As we matured over the period of time, we set up the GABA Foundation and then the GABA Marketplace Center. So one is nonprofit, one is for-profit. The nonprofit end focuses on the technical assistance for our businesses so that they can have the support. We have a lot of business ecosystem partners that are tied in with micro lending and assistance and things. And then on the Marketplace Center end, I work on the trade and investment, port relationships, and of course, government relations with our policymakers at all levels of government here in the state of Michigan. So people know what the GABA plan is all across the state. We have 18 cities in our orbit right here in the state of Michigan, from Detroit all the way to Muskegon, Michigan, and Benton Harbor, which is on the west side of the state. That's how long we've been in this game. and we're not going to stop.
Right. So I like to, I mean, I like to ask this question related to trade mission again. I know the organization is also involved in activities like that. So my question is to know what role do chambers of commerce and investment promotion agencies um, can do in, what role do they play in ensuring trade mission deliver real outcome? How early should this partnership be secured in the planning process? I know with all the activities that you have done, you've been involved in planning and uh, supporting organization in maybe getting the trade mission successful or connecting them to other organizations.
Yes. So, most chamber of commerces or investment promotion agencies in local institutions, we all know that they're backbone of mission outcomes, and so their role is to provide market access, trusted entry points, verified business counterpart identification, and government regulatory access, just to name a few. But these partnerships should be secured at the earliest mission design, not after flights are booked. I'm going to say that one more time. These partnerships should be secured at the earliest stage of the mission design, not after flights are booked. Oftentimes, people say, let's do a trade mission, and they book a flight, they get over there, they don't know what to do. You got to start planning early. If the institutional alignment is not built up front, then the mission risk becomes ceremonial, then transactional. And so we need to understand when you're planning a trade mission, what type of trade mission are you planning? Are you planning a real estate trade mission? Are you doing one on critical minerals? Are you doing one on agribusiness? Are you doing one on education? And with that, are you doing one on skilled trade? So those kinds of trade missions should be specific, and so that way you on this end you know what type of players that you're going to get to the table. If it's a health trade mission, you're going to talk to your hospital system and so forth that may want to go to a Togo, may want to go to a Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and say, hey, listen, these are the type of experiences that we bring from the U.S. into your nation to create that two-way pipeline of investment and investment. So that way, the trade mission becomes transactional. It becomes lasting, as opposed to, hey, we just went to Ghana and hung out and had drinks, and we met some people, and then we come back and there's nothing happening.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So, to my understanding, they need to get prepared at the very early age,
Yes.
to have a successful trade mission. So now, what are the common pitfall? What common pitfalls should small businesses avoid when engaging these markets, like Togo, Ghana, Liberia, like West African market? The best practices you have seen produce sustainable results.
Sure. The most common pitfall organizations should avoid it should be things like entering a nation without credible local execution partners. Don't just go just to go. Um, Cold turkey. That's not going to happen. Treating the region as one uniform market instead of distinct regulatory environments. Over relying on informal assurances rather than structured due diligence. Hosting meetings without defined commercial next steps, and failing to build post-mission accountability systems. So one of the best practices that I teach people is mostly, do chamber-to-chamber frameworks, understanding structured joint venture or distribution models, transaction sequencing with measurable milestones, and long-term institutional presence rather than one-off visit. Because what happens most of the time is that sustainable engagement is built through systems. It's not just the trip you just plan and just go over there and say, "Hey, we met a couple of ministers, we met a couple of chamber folks." They can come back with nothing. The key thing, especially in the 21st century, especially in 2026, the key thing for a trade mission is, hey, listen, we are building this relationship to build build a pipeline between what we're doing in Nebraska, what we're doing in Michigan, and building it here in the nation that you're trying to tackle. And so once you build those two pipelines together, now you have some sustainability. Now you have some things going in your way. Also, from a political perspective, a policy perspective, when you're talking to the mayor of Omaha, when you're talking to the mayor of Detroit, and so forth, you have these relationships already in play. They too can rely on you from your expertise on how to strengthen that network.
Thank you. Those are great insights and great lessons for entrepreneurs to pull from as they are preparing on expanding internationally. Now, are there any specific models based on your experience for small businesses, especially Black-owned businesses who are preparing to build partnerships overseas, especially in Africa? Models such as joint ventures, PPP partnerships that present better potentials in today's environment?
Yeah, here in GABA, we focus on West Africa. We Even though the entire continent is in play, West Africa is a strategy we focus on regionally here for us. It's the strongest region that we have relationships with, and so forth. And so what happens is, what I tell people about West Africa, it presents realistic and significant opportunities, especially for firms that enter through structured models rather than speculative outreach. And so you mentioned joint ventures and things like processing, manufacturing, industrial inputs, distribution partnerships for U.S. goods entering the African consumer markets, which is what we're working on in GABA Marketplace Center, infrastructure collaboration in ports, logistics, cold chain, and energy. And here's the thing about ports. In the Great Lakes, a lot of the ports, whether it's the Port of Cleveland, the Port of Monroe here in Michigan, the Port of Illinois, and so forth, the Port of Duluth, those ports don't have relationships with Africa. None of them have relationships. I was even in a conference in Canada back in November, the H2O conference, and I was speaking to representatives from the Port of Hamilton, Montreal, and so forth. Nobody has relationships with Africa. The key thing, though, is they're looking for those relationships. That's where we all on this call come into play, to build those relationships and to create those logistics and so forth. That's what I mean by infrastructure collaboration. Also about capital mobilization. This is things like blended finance, DFIs, and trade finance tools. And of course, if you're in critical minerals and agro-commodity corridors like what we're doing in GABA Marketplace Center, they have to be aligned with U.S. supply chain needs. Now, the reason that's important is because there's a red hot topic on critical minerals here in the United States. There are 46 bills on the table on Capitol Hill on critical minerals. One of the bills were passed last week by Congressman John James, who's actually running for governor here in the state of Michigan. He passed one of the 46 bills on critical minerals right here in the United States, but they're looking towards Africa as not just as an option. It's really moved to the front of the line. But are we at the table as chambers, as stakeholders, to drive that conversation? So those things with small businesses, those small businesses need to understand the rules of the road when they're trying to penetrate the market.
This is so deep and very important to know. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation, in preparation of future trade missions. So, for small businesses and businesses in general, what should they have in place before participating in any trade mission? I know you talked about the U.S. market needs. So in terms of market research, defining an entry strategy, capital stack clarity, what should they have in place before participating in any trade mission?
Absolutely. Businesses, in my opinion, should never participate in a trade mission without being market ready. Any participant should have completed market research and pricing assumptions, a defined entry strategy, whether it's a joint venture or procurement or export model, capital stack clarity, that means working capital, trade financing, legal and compliance review, risk assessment. Those are some of the few things that people should be ready to understand as when you get ready to do trade. Because what happens is that prepared participants, they're normally entering as a point of being what's the word I'm trying to use here? Implementing. Passive observers enter as tourists. The difference is whether a business can transact within 90 days after the mission. That's very, very important. Um, we have hosted trade missions here in GABA a couple of times, and we took them straight to the source. My CEOs in the audience, making sure that I don't mess up this one. But she can tell you the same thing. We make sure we take people directly to the source, whether it's business, whether it's government or technology. We've done a great job of doing that. Now, it's up to the participants to make that transaction. Either you're an observer or you're going to do business. But we have been very proficient at bringing people to the source. It's the same model in the same sense of taking someone from a Nebraska or Illinois or Michigan into those African markets and ensuring that those things are in place to make things happen.
Absolutely. Now, when you are trying, right, when you are going to a new market, expanding to a new market, there's always risk, like as you've talked about, financial, regulatory, operational risk. How should organizations manage those risks, prepare for those risks in a disciplined manner?
Um, well, the most important thing when you're talking about responsible and disciplined risk, um, those are things like trade finance and payments. You need to understand the importance of trade finance and payment systems. What that means is for example, letters of credit, escrow guarantee, structured settlement, levels of discipline. If you're going to deal with currencies, um, whether it's hedging strategies, depending on what the project is, or USD dominated contracting where appropriate. Custom standards and documentation is a big one that's under regulatory compliance. And my goodness, understand the political and policy shifts within the nation that you're trying to do business in, because you never know that you may have a government that is favorable to you. Tomorrow, it might be something different. So, the type of responsible expansion or expansion, especially with risk, it can be looked upon like a phased execution, whether it's pilot transactions first, institutional support always, compliance before scale, and financing aligned with real trade flows are some of the key things that we can look at when you're doing business.
Right. So, still in this line of discussion, now we want to talk about the cultural intelligence and relationship building. Uh, you know, during these trade missions, West Africa business is highly
Mhm.
relationship driven. So, what cultural considerations should participants understand to build trust, credibility, and long-term partnership? And also, from your perspective, GABA has taken people into trade mission. What have you done in that manner?
Um, what most participants have to understand that trust is built through consistency, not speed. I think that's the biggest mistake I see in any kind of trade mission. It's built through consistency. That means once you are connected to that person that you want to work with, you have to build consistency. It's just like building a friendship. It's not about speed. It's not about, hey, on Monday we met, Tuesday let's cut a deal. It's not that kind of thing. Respect the hierarchy and institutional protocols is very important. If you do not understand that rule of the road, you're most likely dead. Local partner values long-term commitment over transactional intent. Face-to-face engagement is often essential before contracts are finalized. They want, we're living in the age of Zoom and StreamYard and all these instruments, but face-to-face engagement is always best. And credibility comes through follow-through, not introduction. Um, One of the key things that we have always been good at in GABA, not to toot our horn, is that if you say you need something done through us, we do follow through, and that's why a lot of folks trust our judgment and trust our leadership, because we're good in what we do when it comes to building that type of capacity. So culture intelligence is very important. It's a commercial asset. Trust is very, very vital. If you are serious about conducting business um, on these trade missions. Other than that, just not ready to play ball.
Can you, just a question, uh, do you have any success story, or a case like that during one of your trade missions that you want to share
We
with us?
Yeah, we hosted two key trade missions, really three, but there are two key trade missions. So trade missions are not just going to West Africa or East Africa. Trade missions can be from Africa into the U.S. So the trade mission, people forget that, and so
Inbound and outbound.
inbound and outbound, correct. And so what we did in 2024, um, we hosted three trade missions, but I'm gonna focus on two. The second trade mission we did. Well, I'll say all three. So the first trade mission was actually with our our strategic partners in Nigeria, Duchess Naturals Limited. They stayed here a whole week with us. Um, there was a fact finding mission on their end, and they you know, and the CEO of Duchess, she has been you met her, Kareem, Johnny, you met her also, Dr. Victoria Akai. She's been working with us for a decade in GABA
She's
alone.
amazing.
And yep, and so she'll tell you the story that I've been beating her over the head trying to get her here to see what we have to offer. So she stayed here a whole week and said, "Whoa, this is very powerful. Um, we can build organically here." The second trade mission we hosted was the Consulate General of Nigeria. They came here for a few days. We set up meetings with government, business, the ports, um, and their office in New York has been locked with us ever since. And then the third one was a big one. That was NASEMA, um, the Nigerian Association of Chamber of Commerce and Industries, Mines, and Agriculture. They hosted a big trade mission here that back in September 2024, right here in Michigan. We took them to the ports, we took them to government, we actually took them to the state capitol where we were able to sign a MOU between GABA and NASEMA right in front of the two state senators. These are two powerful state senators that we are aligned with. We were able to do that and um and really just build some business relationships through there. So everybody is locked in like that. And so when we bring people to Michigan, we would do the same with the Midlands African Chamber. You guys come to Michigan, we will set up the meetings, business, government, technology. We show you how to invest here. We show you the ropes, and we kind of build organically from there. So it's the same. I'm just using the chamber for an example. This is what we do, and we would do the same thing. We would do the same thing to Africa. That, hey, this is who you're going to meet with. This is what you're going to do. And our trade missions, we've already decided that trade missions that we host going to the continent has to be very specific. It's not just, oh, it's just a trade mission and we have a group of people and blah, 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 blah. No, it has to be something about critical minerals or real estate or education and so forth.
That's really fascinating, and I see the sign behind you that says GABA Marketplace. I know you have really put a lot of energy into not on into the inbound trade missions, but also into the GABA marketplace. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the GABA marketplace started and how that has evolved over the past few years,
Oh yeah.
and what your hopes are for it?
Yeah, absolutely. It really started 12 years ago. We were launched GABA 12 years ago as the National African Business Association. My CEO, Mr. Ariana Make, um, sh- she noticed that there was an Iraqi um, store in Oak Park, Michigan, that sold African Caribbean food to our people, and she didn't like that. And she figured, you know what, we need to have a structure in place where we can support our grocery stores. Our grocery stores need a lot of assistance, technical assistance, business assistance, funding, financing. A lot of them don't have websites where people can buy online. It's just is That's just where they're at. The marketplace. So fast forward to 2022, I'm injured. Broke my leg. I was in a nursing home for several months, and I came up with this concept, GABA Marketplace Center. I figured, you know what, we need a for-profit arm to the Global African Business Association, and we need to focus on how to support our grocery stores in a very controlled space. And so that's where that came about. And we launched our first flagship store in 2023, March 2023, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But as time moved on, we said, wait a minute, we're tied in with a lot of the business ecosystem partners that does micro lending, that does trainings and so forth. But we noticed people were driving 4 or 5 hours to Chicago to get their food. They were getting their stuff from New York. They were driving to Cincinnati and so forth. And so the concept of the trade hub came about, and it just evolved. And I went to Lansing. I lobbied in Lansing to get funding. Um, we got the funding. The trade hub was purchased last year. We're building out the trade hub as we speak. It should be done very shortly. Hopefully by May, we should be moving in the direction of operation. We decided to launch an e-commerce platform for Dutchess, our strategic partners in Abuja, Nigeria. We did that. Uh, uh, so we launched the Dutchess store for them. That way, we were able to. That way, we were able to um, get products in from their end right into the state of Michigan. Some of these products have never touched U.S. soil, and they've been coming through us so that we can showcase those products. It is a rigorous process of getting those products here. We just don't accept any product. We have an intake form that we utilize. If you can get through the intake form on the first try, then the products are getting to our e-commerce store. If not, we have a program called GABA Works. GABA Works is an online training module, a series of modules to help SMEs in Africa understand what we expect in the U.S. market before we can move your products over here. So everything we do is very systemic, but we were able to get the e-commerce store, and then there's a retail component that's coming up that we're going to connect to the trade hub. There are two retail components. One is a Ken's Market, which is the community grocery store we're going to connect, and then the Dutchess Marketplace is the other retail component that we're going to connect here in Michigan, which is more boutique style, premium products, African products for a specific demographic. And so we're creating our own ecosystem here. And that's very important that we create our own ecosystem, because the problem that most people have is they talk about Africa theoretically, but there's nothing to connect economic development and putting people to work with our own products, our own services, to say to a politician or a U.S. senator or whatever, this is the reason why you should be supporting our works with AGOA, African Growth Opportunity Act, because these are the things that we're doing, and connecting the GABA Marketplace to other entities like the American Great Lakes Port Association, which we're a member of. So now we have relationships with the ports on the Great Lakes. That's very significant because again, like I said earlier, port authorities on the Great Lakes don't have relationships with Africa. They're not doing any business with Africa, none. And what one of the key things when I spoke to the chair of that organization in Toronto back in November, I told him, I said, let me be your voice for Africa, the continent, not even West Africa, the continent. He said, man, he almost broke down. He said, man, I just really, really, really appreciate you stepping up and being a member, because I don't know anything about Africa, and they don't. It's nothing racist or anything malicious. They just don't know how to penetrate the African market and so forth. That is where the GABA Marketplace Center comes into play.
Yeah, this is amazing. Akindele, I think it'll be interesting to have GABA come to the upcoming International Agribusiness and Manufacturing Fair that the Midlands African Chamber is partnering with another organization called International Agribusiness Initiative, that with the goal of promoting and promoting the agribusiness between the U.S. Midwest and African countries. So it's going to be on September 3rd and 4th here in Nebraska. So I will share more details about that event to you. And I think there's a lot of a lot of things that GABA can play as a role into this upcoming event. So, talking about events and upcoming opportunities, I'd like to know what are the upcoming opportunities or events that GABA has for entrepreneurs and the community.
Well, it's a lot. It's a lot. I'll be transparent. We're partnering with our friends in the Liberian Association of Michigan. They're hosting a trade mission to Liberia in June. So the vice president of LAM here in Detroit, I'm working with her to kind of organize that for her and her group. We've met with the trade ambassador over there. He was actually here in Michigan about a month ago. So we're working with them to make sure that's very successful for their organization. Our primary goal right now is getting this trade hub off the ground. It's a very ambitious project. Building the ecosystem. People in Africa are very anxious to move product over here. It's a very tedious situation because you have to put all the small pieces in play. What I mean by that, you have to, everything I talked about, your trade financing, who are you working with, the USXMIM Bank, because you're not just focusing on importing goods from Africa, you also have to focus on exporting goods to Africa. And so that's how trade really works. And so we are trying to identify what that looks like. I mean, are we exporting soybeans? Are we exporting cars, and so forth into African markets? And so it's a very, very tedious process that we're working with and working on, but mostly getting the trade hub off the ground. We do have our GABA Glow dinner coming up in August. Of course, our friends in the Midlands are more than welcome to hang out with us on the week during the weekend. It's in the first weekend of August. One Voice Africa reception, of course, is in September during the CBC weekend.
Tell us a little bit more about that. You and I have talked a little bit, but I've always been fascinated with your advocacy efforts, and I know that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it is. It's One Voice Africa is a reception we host every year at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation annual legislative conference. This will be the 10th year that we've done it, and so it was a small group of us that started it 10 years ago. Our GABA, our friends at NAPAC, the Nigerian Association Public Affairs Committee, and a few other organizations started the One Voice Africa reception. It's been going on for 10 years. It's a platform that we utilize to bring together, African immigrant leaders, whether they're elected leaders or running for office, to give them a platform to talk about why Africa matters. And so we do that. We help build networking and relationships through that reception. It's grown over the years. is very, very successful. People look forward of coming together. We hope we can see the Midlands, you guys there this September with us. I know you guys haven't been yet, but we hope to see you there this September. Also, UNGA is coming up, United Nations General Assembly. We go there to build relationships, build those relationships with trade and investment. So it's a lot. We have a lot on our plate. Not to mention that we are also members of the Detroit Regional Chamber. They have a big conference every May called the Mackinac Policy Conference that we attend. This is with all the players across the state, from the governor on down to the private sector. This is an opportunity for us as an African ecosystem to talk about why Africa matters, whether it's critical minerals, agro products, industry, manufacturing. We have an opportunity to have FaceTime with major players across the state about why our issues matter and what we are doing to solve those problems.
Akindele, thank you so much for these wonderful insights. I know we do have some folks that are watching us on the different social media platforms. I want to invite them to put their questions in the chats, in the comments, so that we can answer their questions, have you answer their questions. They have been very engaged in the comments. I see their comments here, on the screen. Thank you for joining us, Rona, Tiffany, Oreri, Onomake, Cecilia, all of you that are in your homes watching us or at your offices participating in the MAC Agora B2B. It's a pleasure having you. Join us. Feel free to add your questions in the comments. We do have a few minutes still yet left here, so that those questions can be answered. Now, Akindele, I want to give you a chance again to share with us. I know you've done a lot of work on the advocacy side for a successful, to build a successful advocacy program. And also, I see a post here from Rona, which she's sharing about your nonprofit work at the GABA Foundation, and she put the link in here. Thank you so much for sharing that link, Rona. We appreciate you doing so. I was asking about advocacy, Akindele. What is your recommendation for members and chamber members and business owners that don't necessarily see advocacy as, part of, as important to their day-to-day, engagement?
That's a good question. I'm gonna answer that question from this angle. As members, we're members again of the Detroit Regional Chamber, signature members. So signature members, that's the highest membership you can receive at Detroit Regional Chamber. So we go into rooms that other chamber members can't get into. One of the things that the chamber does a good job of, every Friday I get an email from their policy team about the bills that are pending in our state capital of Lansing with lawmakers to keep us abreast of what's going on. That is very vital. What most people forget, business and government is a marriage. You're not going to be able to separate the two. It's just impossible. And I have never understood it. And unfortunately, I've had to have debates within my own network. They want to be business owners, but they don't like dealing with politicians or government. And I'm saying, who do you think is making your business, your policies, to either make your business easy or make your business hard? And most of the time, it's the people who elect. So you have to have a system of advocacy to do that. Here's, for example, with us, we have introduced a number of bills in GABA at the state level. I like working with state government because you're able to touch your lawmaker. You can pick up the phone and call your state rep or state senator that you have a relationship with, and you can talk about the issues of the day. We have introduced three, not one, but three AGOA resolutions in the state of Michigan, African Growth Opportunity Act. Two on the Senate side, one on the House side. And guess what? AGOA was renewed for a year. We introduced a bill called Senate Bill 267, which is the creation of the African Caribbean Trade Commission in the state of Michigan. That bill happened to pass in December out of the Michigan Senate on a bipartisan, which is very, very unheard of in 2026. On a bipartisan measure, now sitting in the House. We're trying to move it in the House right now as we're having this conversation. We've introduced bills and advocated at a state level, even with our county commissioners. And of course, we have relationships with mayors across the state talking about our issues. I think one mayor, we were at the Michigan Black Summit about a couple of weeks ago in Benton Harbor, Michigan. That particular mayor, Marcus Muhammad, who's the mayor of Benton Harbor, he took a trip to Ghana. And one of the things he told me was, he said, we have to have conversations about Africa more at the local levels of government. That's absolutely correct. And so we advocate for business and government and technology the way we do, whether it's jobs, food, and energy. We advocate for these instruments because we all know that it's all interconnected. People who are trying to separate this stuff. Oh, I'm not going to deal with government. I'm not going to deal with the politicians. I'm not going to deal with the business. That's a recipe for disaster. You'll never be able to elevate the way you should elevate. It's all relationship based from the local to the global levels, and you have to change your mindset.
Akindele, I personally want to say thank you for sharing your experience and practical insights. Today's conversation reinforces that successful trade missions require preparation, institutional alignment, discipline, sequencing, and long-term commitment. I have learned a lot, and I'm really, excited to continue this conversation and have you over here in Nebraska for our upcoming events. MAC B2B Agora is more than a discussion. It's an invitation to approach global engagement throughout thoughtfully and with responsibly. So sorry. So if you are serious about Africa, about meaningful market entry, partnership development, and long-term corridor building, now it's the time to prepare. Karine?
Absolutely, John. And thank you so much, Akindele. As always, it was a pleasure having you, sharing space with us, and your insights were wonderful. You were so on point with everything on advocacy, trade, and preparation. We definitely want to be part of some of the events that you mentioned in Michigan and in DC, and hope to have you here in Nebraska as part of the upcoming I Am Fair event in September, or as part of our Pitch Black event, which was gonna be on May 2nd. We would love to have you come back again. This will be the sixth Pitch Black. May 2nd in Omaha, bringing together entrepreneurs, investors, ecosystem leaders. Just for you guys that are watching us, we still have our early bird specials going on right now till the end of the month at wepitchblack.com. Before that, though, this week, on Thursday, on February 19, we'll be having our Power Hour. Our guest speaker for that Power Hour is is Keely Taylor with quarterly HR compliance risk management. She'll be giving us an update on that. We are also going to have our MAC Foundation suit up on March 14 in partnership with Girls Inc. of Omaha. So we are super excited about the events that we have coming up for the rest of this month and also the next few months here at MAC, and looking forward to our next Agora B2B. We will have more information coming up in the next few weeks for you. But thank you again, Akindele, for sharing space with us today.
No problem. Anytime.
Yes, absolutely. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
All right. Thank you, Karim. Thank you, Akindele.
Thank you.
See you next time.
See you next time.
All right.